I'm Rihanna, and welcome back to Fresh Off the Broke.
Fresh Off the Broke is about personal experiences growing up Asian American in a predominantly white community, Asian media, and Asian pop culture in general. Race has always been a sensitive topic. Every day there are debates over race. With our podcast, we intend to shed light on the experiences of first-generation Asian immigrants, not put them on a pedestal.
We understand that race isn't everything, but there should be an acknowledgement of people of color, the knowledge gap, and the racial divide that will ideally be broken. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the episode. Today's topic is overwork culture in Asia.
Yes. And in case you're wondering, what's going on, or what's that? Basically, and this isn't a new thing. It's been a topic of conversation in, I don't know if I want to say the media, because there was media coverage on it, but definitely not widespread mainstream. Oh my God, everyone's talking about this thing.
Yeah.
Coverage. But basically, as of recent, as well as ever since forever,
yeah,
in Asia, and we're gonna focus on East Asia, Southeast Asia, this episode. There's just this huge, awful overwork culture where people are working 12 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, in these awful conditions, or just these extremely, how do you put this, just horrible job, you don't really get any benefits, and even if you do, they somehow figure out a way to make it so that you don't really get it, or there's always a catch.
Yeah.
And fast forward to today, the state of the economy, and also with COVID, work from home jobs make it super hard to set boundaries between workspace and home space, especially if, you're working an office job or a job that was able to be transferred online, or even as a student, you're working all the time, or doing homework all the time, or reading all the time. And because of COVID and the whole remote situation, they made it so that, you always have free time now, right?
Yeah.
Do your work, which isn't the case. It was always the same amount of time. It's just, excuse me, you're at home now while you're doing it. And to add on to that, in general, because of lovely capitalism, with every year and just in general, there's always so much competition. And not even just competition in the sense of, you're fighting for a job or fighting for a position in school or in a club or in anything. It's also just because of this whole exploitative culture, you saying, I'm not okay with working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And you'll see why I reference this a lot. It will be explained in a bit. But if you won't work those hours and in these awful conditions, someone else will. A lot of bosses and a lot of just authoritative figures, they won't sit and think, maybe this isn't fair, and okay, maybe we can work something out. No, they'll just hire someone else, because someone else will do it, because people have always been, in need for money, right?
Yeah.
Especially with COVID and job losses and just all these horrible things happening. More than ever, people are really worried about, food scarcity, and also just, where you're going to get your income.
Yeah, being able to pay rent, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's incredibly terrible to see that even though you may not want to work these long hours because it should not be allowed, people have no choice but to work these hours to have a stable life or provide for their family or provide the bare minimum for their family, and they have to do all these terrible things.
Yeah, and the people, the higher up, they will see it as, you're being lazy, or okay, you're being so entitled, you think you deserve whatever. Yeah. But someone else is going to take this job. Yeah, because someone's desperate. Someone needs money.
Yeah.
You think they like it?
Yeah, exactly. Like
You
just
found someone else to
because
exploit.
yeah, just because someone will do it doesn't mean that it's a good thing.
Yeah. But these people aren't all just unaware of what's going on. They know what they're doing.
Oh yeah, yeah. They know.
Like maybe some are a little unself-aware because some people are just, so far off
Yeah.
the deep end that they think, I don't know.
Once again, we love capitalism.
Thanks, capitalism. Love you.
Yeah. So now we're going to touch upon examples of overwork culture in specific countries, and the first place we'll talk about is Japan.
Now, before we start with Japan, one thing that's really important to note is that for the longest time, and it's still been happening, people have put Japan on its own model pedestal, basically championing it as the super country of super cute thing, the like very high tech thing, and then wow, look at this cute quirky thing from Japan. And yes, they are very capable of all those things.
Mm-hmm.
However, one thing, and this is a personal observation that I've just like made over time, is that I feel like Japan kind of has its own model minority myth in a way where people think or just expect them to be better or capable of all these things, but then they don't see the reality of the insane overwork culture or death by overwork, exhaustion, just like not sleeping and all these things. That's the real dark truth behind all their great innovations. Like admittedly very great innovations, but at the same time, there's a lot behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Japan also has one of the higher suicide rates as well.
Mm-hmm.
So all things to be considered before putting them on a model pedestal.
Mm-hmm. And these things are also pretty connected as well. So.
Mm-hmm. So the first thing that I'm gonna touch on is pretty simple, just sleep deprivation. Well, not just sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is not just a thing. I'm sleep deprived as I'm recording. Fall asleep right now. Anyway, one thing that's pretty interesting but quite sad is that since sleep deprivation is so normalized in Japan, sleeping on the subway is super common to the point where you'll just see people sleeping on strangers' shoulders and you wouldn't blink an eye.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it's not the whole subway cart, it's just asleep. But it's common enough to be a normalized thing, or if you just saw it, oh, okay, someone's sleeping. Yep. Just another Tuesday.
Yeah.
And not even just subway carts. There'll be people practically passed out asleep on park benches and similar locations, just like public locations, park benches, subways, probably buses, bus stops. The bus stops where they have seats and stuff, probably there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can't say I haven't had my fair share of almost falling asleep on I don't know, just out in the I was gonna say the wild, but I don't know if you really call the city the wild. The opposite of the wild. In a sense. Concrete jungle. And the thing with overwork culture in Japan is that I don't know, I mean I've talked about sleep deprivation and also this whole model pedestal thing. But also I remember a few years ago, about like 4 or 5 years ago, there was this whole thing online where people were saying, whoa, Japan is doing 4-day weekend and people aren't working on Fridays anymore. And when I was working on this episode, when I was like doing research for Japan,
Mm-hmm.
the place we're talking about right now, in case you didn't notice,
Yes.
that actually wasn't true. Well, the 4-day weekend still existed, but the thing is, what happened was that at the end of every month, the last week of every month, basically the last Friday, people could take that day off. And it was called Premium Friday. And when it was first unveiled, it was, and you'll see this mentioned in the media when it first came out. There is a video linked in our description. You'll see a distinction in the brackets. I made sure with videos and articles, they have parts of the title in the link, but videos, they'll just say, oh, YouTube. So the one where it says Vice on Premium Friday, that's the one that correlates to the topic I'm talking about right now. When they first unveiled this, it was very much kind of marketing stunty, and it was broadcasted in the media, and it was very much, hey, you get Friday off. And also, people got $30, or I'm not really all that sure how to explain it. They basically got not like a waiver, but they got this $30 sheet thing kind of as a gift. And the thing is, at the time, when I first heard about it, and also at the time when it was put into place, people were super excited because, whoa, 4-day weekend. Well, they also thought that it was every week, people in the West and just outside. Whoa, that's so great of them. They understand overwork culture, and also they understand the importance of maintaining your health. But the thing is, the reality of that is it didn't really make all that much of a difference, because the next day or just the next work day, your boss is gonna make you make up for that time. You're gonna have to get up earlier or work later. So Premium Friday ain't so premium after all.
Yeah.
You know? It's still in place from what I've seen, but you know, if it was so revolutionary, we'd hear more about it, and also more places would maybe start doing it. I won't guarantee that, since you know how it is.
Yeah.
But there you have it.
Yeah, it reminds me of that, when you're in school and maybe you have a party, like your teacher decides to throw a party for something, and then everyone thinks, oh, we don't have to do work, but then the next day it's like, no, actually, we have to do double the work today because you had a good time yesterday, so you have to make up for that. That's kind of the feeling I'm getting, but instead it's for actual, like, an actual job that you make money for. I would not like it, to be honest.
Which thing, the Premium Friday?
Yeah. Or no, yeah.
Yeah, it just seemed a bit over glorified even when it came out. Oh, sounds like I'm talking about an album. Have you listened to the new
Oh God.
worker policy? Premium Friday just dropped. John Doe or Premium Friday?
Oh my gosh. Comment down below.
I'm so sorry.
Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Philippines, and by a little, I literally mean a little, because overworking culture is not really a thing in the Philippines. There isn't the same, you wouldn't see the same things as in Japan, for example, people falling asleep on the subway because they're overworked, like businessmen just sleeping anywhere. That's not really a thing. Obviously, there's going to be overworking anywhere, but there is no culture, I would say. If anything, there is a sense of being proud of overworking, because in the Philippines, it's more of a, wow, you made the choice to overwork to make more money. Look at you. It's something impressive. Obviously, I'm not saying that it's a good thing, because overworking is not good for you, especially if you do it too much. But again, it's understandable if you need to overwork to, put food on the table for you and your family.
Right.
But again, it's one of those things that is seen as impressive, or like, oh, look at him. He's going overtime today. That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's an annoying commonality among Asian countries. And I mean, it's also something that happens in the West and like everywhere. But it's just a really annoying commonality where it kind of ties back to what we were saying during the intro, where, oh, someone else will take the job, or look, this person cares about our company. They're putting their life on the line. Look at them. They stayed up till 3. You see, that's the face of a person that cares about the success of this company. All of you should learn from them, you know? I hate that.
Yeah. And there is an article in our description about overworking / being a workaholic specific to the Philippines. And it states it pretty well that people wear it as like a badge of honor when they say, oh, I'm a workaholic. That's a good thing. It's like, oh, I love working. I have a great work ethic. But obviously, to your physical, mental well-being, that's probably not a good thing. It definitely isn't a good thing if you're a workaholic,
Yeah.
But again, it is seen as something that's like something to be proud of. Like, look at me, I have a very, very strong work ethic, even if it has like detrimental effects to my well-being.
I consider myself pretty overworked, and I wouldn't go and tell someone that I'm a workaholic because I don't enjoy it,
Yeah.
And I'm sure a number or a good portion of these people don't enjoy it, but they just say that they're a workaholic to be impressive. But at the same time, like things that end in holics.
Yeah.
I
mean, I guess I can understand if it's like, oh, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm a workaholic, ha ha ha. But like, that's not a good thing either.
Yeah, it's not.
Obviously, there's different severities to all of these holic things, but
Yeah, and I mean, everything in moderation. Well, maybe not everything. Some things just shouldn't be done.
Yeah, I agree.
But, in moderation.
You guys get what we mean.
Yeah, we don't. We understand each other, right?
Yeah, right?
We start crying.
Yeah.
No one understands me. Moving on to the next country. Now, earlier you've heard me make some references to people working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Well, this country is kind of where it all started. Drum roll, please. No drum roll. This is not a celebratory moment. The next country I will be talking about is China. And there's actually a name for this very specific work schedule or work model, and it's called the 996 culture, which is working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., which is 12 hours, and then 6 being 6 days a week. And this became This work schedule model basically became very well known, and also it became a thing through a company called Alibaba, which is basically how do I put this? They're a very big company that's made up of a lot of smaller sister companies, AliExpress, things like that. And let me just do a very quick check to make sure that I'm not misremembering. They also own Taobao, which is an online shopping marketplace. Oh, and Tmall. Yeah. They're one of the world's largest retailers and e-commerce companies. Yeah, That's a good way to put it. I just had a hard time summarizing it because it's one of those companies that has bought out many companies, and so I was not all that sure how to categorize it in that very moment. But yes, it basically came through that company, and I mean, you don't need me to tell you that it was awful, but it was, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. I mean, even if you had lunch breaks, or even if your buildings looked very pretty and you were in decent condition, that's just so much on someone.
Mm-hmm.
And in places like that, whether you're working as office staff or, I don't know, maybe you're an intern or something, you're definitely going to be probably doing something at all hours of the day. Because the thing with overwork culture and hustle culture and everything is that the grind never stops, And when you're being exploited by your boss, they want to make the most out of what they're paying you. And, they would like to make more than you're being paid. And I don't mean make more than they're being paid more than you, because of course they're being paid more than you. That's why they're above you.
Yeah.
But it's more that, for example, say you're working, I don't know, $15 an hour, which is essentially about minimum wage here. Kind of, not really. Right now it's like 14 something.
Yeah.
But regardless, say you're working $15 an hour, but the thing is, during those hours, you're like traveling a lot, or you're just doing so much that it seems like your labor, and it's not even seems like, your labor is definitely worth more than $15 an hour. And your boss knows that, but they're not giving you a raise. They're just giving you more things to do in the limited quote-unquote time that you have. And there was tons and tons of talk about this, and there has been on various Chinese forums, which I've linked to specific threads in the description. Unfortunately, they are only available in written Chinese. However, there is the option to use one of those browser translation tools. I know Windows, when you open a website that's basically in an entirely different language, they'll ask you if you want to translate it. So I would suggest maybe trying that if you're not proficient in the Chinese language, or like the overall Chinese language. Like Chinese isn't a language, but you know what I mean. Because unfortunately, it's not available in English. These are just threads. For example, one of them is asking, "Oh, what are your thoughts on Alibaba's 996 work style?" And it's basically just people's personal opinion that I thought, along with news or more quote-unquote scholarly sources, we would also include, very candid opinions from people, because, those are the people on the ground. Those are the people actually working. Because, I mean, hey, some of these articles that are up here, people writing them might have been exploited, We don't know that. They can't tell us that. So it's important that we also include more candid and honest takes as well. Like more, because when you're working in journalism, your work needs to be looked over. But when you're writing in a thread, just, I don't know, on social media or online, it's not as heavily moderated. So do check that out if you're interested or able to. And one thing that is great news, but also it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, I guess they're going to find a different way to exploit people. But first off, great news. Back in August of 2021, so this year, but also, if you're listening to this in 2022 or 2023 or whatever, then a few years ago, China passed laws stopping and basically putting an end or just controlling 996 culture so that people aren't allowed to work 12 hours a day, and they're going to be setting limits on work hours or days worked and stuff like that, which is great. People have been wanting this for the longest time, and now workers are more protected in that they, they don't get hit with the, oh, well, it's not like it's not allowed or something, which I think is great, especially since you're thinking about, like the most grueling jobs. I mean, it's not just about office work. Office work also isn't the only work. There's people that work in factories that also have to submit to 996 culture. And if you think about it, say you're working in a clothing factory, or maybe you're working in mining or something like that, very manual labor. If you're working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, that's so detrimental to your physical health.
Yeah.
In the sense that, you're very susceptible, to injury.
Yeah.
And so I was really happy when I saw the news. And, of course, there's also the thought that, okay, well, for example, if they're only allowed to work up to 9 hours a day, well, the boss is just going to squeeze all the tax into those 9 hours. But at the same time, I like to think that they're maybe less able to do that, because 9 hours and 12 hours, there's only so much you can squeeze to exploit.
Yeah.
And I'm just happy that the limit is at least there, because this has been going on forever, and all over the world is so hard to get like worker unionization. And I mean, you've may have heard about what goes on in Amazon, where they're basically very anti-unionization and like monitor their factory staff so closely, and just I don't know, like wear the shock collar every time. I mean, that's not.
Yeah.
I just made that up. Please don't sue me.
Yeah, that is not real.
That was completely a joke. Not speculation, just a joke. But you get my point. And, if you're interested in learning more about 996 culture, I did link a Vice mini documentary short dive in on 996 culture, where they talk with some people that have worked or were at the time of filming working those very strenuous hours. It's a very interesting look, because there is this one interview that they did. Basically, the lady was on her way out of a shift, and it went on later because of a meeting. And I remember they were asking, like, oh, are you going to get compensated for that? Like, no.
Oh my god.
And it was really realistic, but also hard to watch, because they were basically like, so she happened to work in an office, but they were basically doing this interview kind of like on the go, and she was doing work while they were also doing. It was really sad. I mean, it's a really real look into it, and I'm glad that they got that footage, but at the same time, it just pained me to see, because I relate in many ways, but also not, because, I am not of that demographic or age to work like a full-time job in like an office, or just like a full-time job in general, but hard to watch. Yeah, I highly recommend watching that Vice video, or like checking out the Chinese forums, or just checking out some of the sources or just links that we put in the description, because they're really good for further understanding, but of course, of your own liberty. Yeah. We're not forcing you to do anything.
So lastly, we are going to talk about Korea. And first point is, Korea averages the longest working hours out of the big three. And by big three, we mean Korea, China, and Japan. And in 2020, The average working hours of employees in South Korea was 163.6 hours per week, which translates to 6.816666 days per week.
Mm-hmm.
And in case y'all don't know, there are 7 days in a week.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, and the thing is, along with that statistic, last year there was a news story about delivery men literally dying of overwork during the pandemic boom of how do I put this? I don't want to call it like shopping crisis or anything, but
just like an overwhelming need for like online delivery services,
yes,
essentially.
yes, and that on the flip side or on the other side of the, I don't know, where the grass is greener.
Yeah.
There are people that don't have to overwork to provide for their families, and they're just chilling during COVID. Like, oh wow, quarantine is so fun. And so they're doing online shopping and online this and online that. And these delivery men, they're being overworked to the bone to make these demands and please their bosses and also feed themselves and their families if they have any. And there were just so many people, it was just so awful. People were just dying of overwork and exhaustion. And I do have a link to a video. It's I don't want to call it a documentary, and I also don't really want to call it news coverage, but there is just an interesting video that you can watch about what happened with the South Korean delivery workers. I will say it's a tough watch, because they're really dark stories, and you think about what these people were trying to do for their families, and it's the opposite of dying doing what you love.
Yeah.
A not very fun fact at all. There is quite literally a word or a term in Korean for when someone dies from overworking, and it has an interesting history because if you track far back enough, it had actually originated from Japan, and then if you track even farther, it originated from Chinese language, which, we're all connected by a very unfortunate thing. But essentially, it raises a huge issue when there's a word for someone dying of overworking. It's not like, hey, new slang term just dropped. It's literally, you had to come up with a word for a tragic incident. It's the same as when there are new diseases discovered and then, they need to get named for identification purposes. And it's just awful, and I mean, the terms themselves, they're very literal, that's the thing with Asian languages. So it's basically, like exhaustion, death, or similar thing to that. It wouldn't really work in English because of the way English is, but
yeah,
they're basically very, very just literal terms. It's like, oh, exhaustion, death, or like overwork, death. And fast forward to today, or basically just looking at today in general, very recently in Korea, members of the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions were protesting and lobbying because they wanted better work conditions and better employment rights, policies, benefits in general. And they were doing this, they were making these statements while wearing Squid Game costumes. And, if you're unfamiliar with what Squid Game is, it is a Netflix show. It's a Korean Netflix show, basically focuses a lot on capitalism, classism, and essentially, if I can summarize it very shortly, it's basically a series of children's games that people are kind of tricked into participating in.
Mm-hmm.
And the prize is just an insane amount of money. And
yeah.
If you're unfamiliar with Squid Game, it's basically a Korean Netflix show that focuses a lot on capitalism, exploitation, and the whole gist of the show and the games is that these people that are, suffering from maybe poverty or just they're in need of money, they're tricked into joining in these games and competitions that are just children's games, like red light, green light, and stuff like that. And they're told, oh, do you want to make easy money? Participate in these games. And it turns out there's this huge prize for like millions or billions of won, which is Korean currency. But, there's this whole twist where, if you lose, you actually die. And the whole show just talks about, like rich people throwing money at poor people and just showing how the bottom of the bottom get left to rot, or in the case of this show, they get forced into these games, and it's just like, oh wow, it's so entertaining. These people are playing red light, green light, and then like they're all dying, and like they all want this money so badly, and it's just all about like desperation and people being like exploited, and just like how capitalism just drives people to work against each other. So these people, the union members, wearing these costumes, they were wearing the guard costumes. So it shows an interesting light, since in the show, the guards were very much kind of like personality-less people for most of the show. They were just, like escorting people or just helping with the game in a sense, except not as people, more as just like a character. And they all like look the same because it covers their face as well. And so them doing this very much shows the statement of like, one, it's kind of like a pop culture reference, and so it's like their way of not inciting violence, but you know what I mean. It's like, hey, power in numbers. And it's like they're also making reference like, hey, we're basically like this,
which is not a good thing at all.
Yeah, not a good thing at all. And it goes back to what we were saying about like economic crises, and it's not easy to even have a union in general. Like what I was saying earlier, a lot of companies, they will actively, even if they don't outwardly say you're not allowed to unionize, they'll actively make efforts. So that is super hard for you to unionize. And so the fact that there is a union and they're working so hard is already just like a huge thing. And I wish them well. I think they definitely deserve better working conditions, benefits, and everything. So if you're out there listening, I'm rooting for you.
So all that we just talked about really boils down to this high expectation of Asians, and especially in the Western world, we see this through, immigrants overworking to provide for their families. Like, as we've touched upon it before, some people don't really have the choice to not work or not overwork or work really, really long, stressful hours. And it's very apparent in the West for immigrants because
Mm-hmm.
just the way that things are structured. You come here, normally your degrees aren't recognized. You can't get the job that you used to have. You have to work quote unquote entry level jobs, being a cashier, something like that. Long, hard hours for minimum wage. And it's this whole like trickle down effect where it also leads into immigrant children where there's this extreme guilt that's just like my parent has to work multiple jobs, maybe really long hours just to provide for me. So now I have to have the same work ethic, or at least, a pressure to do um maybe like a get a degree, especially. I think that's a pretty general thing. There's a pressure to get a secondary level education so you can get a better paying job.
Mm-hmm.
Extreme guilt. I mean, I know
Yeah.
personally I've been that.
Yeah. And there are also the trickle down in the sense that uh, their kids work more than one job to support the family or like help with supporting the family. Like once they're old enough to get a job,
Hmm.
they'll immediately get one. And many.
Yeah, or like not
I
even.
may or may not be doing this.
Yeah, you might not even be old enough to have a job, but you need to get a job. I know a lot of people who they aren't getting jobs for themselves. They are getting jobs to help pay off their families' like mortgages. Like this
Mm-hmm.
isn't money for themselves. This is money to feed their families, like keep their homes essentially. Like
One thing that can be pretty frustrating with this whole topic in general is that there isn't really a big or just main solution that we can just go to solve all these things. It's more, lobbying for change, helping those protesting, supporting worker unionization, and just in general, seeking out community efforts or just being aware of what's happening in your community and supporting causes that, like maybe touch you or you find important. Like
mhm.
I won't force you to support this cause or that cause or support anything. But, like have some empathy.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, something that's not as frustrating is that, like we mentioned throughout this episode, some changes have been made, trying to pass that law. In Japan, they do have the monthly 4-day weekend. And conditions have started getting better very slowly, but this is only the first step to better employee rights in general.
Mhm. Also, please just ignore those dumb videos or just content in general about how it's just so easy to make money and you're just lazy because you don't want to find a job. You know, grind slash hustle culture in social media is just really disturbing and gross. And as much as possible, maybe stay away from that if you are not into that. And if you're not into that, I don't think you should be worried because there seems to be a very big trend in people who don't really want to work at all because the conditions that work culture is nowadays is just so unrewarding. It's not even worth it. So like people are really just like, why would I want to have an entry level job, quote unquote, when they're already asking for so much prior experience? Like it's just, as we said earlier, so much competition, and people are tired of that. And again, also kind of has to do with what we said earlier. Stand together. Like it's more power in numbers, as we said.
Let's go. And lastly, as always, as much as you and let's do our best, even if it's a really small thing, to take care of ourselves amidst all of this. We can't all, like a certain someone, take an impulse trip to the moon when we're bored and tired of the world. But we sure can, do a little stretch, get some water, maybe look out the window just to rest our eyes for a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely won't change your life, but, it's good to do little things to take care of yourselves as much as you can, since, like we said, we can't just quit your job because you don't like it. Well, some people can, but a lived reality for many people is that they can't just do that because, they're bored or they're tired because of the horrible work condition. Some people, they really do just have to keep working. So, as much as you can in your own way, try to take care of yourself.
And remember your worth.
Because it's definitely not that horrible salary.
Yeah, it's way, way more than that.
Priceless. Your existence to us, priceless. You listening to us, also priceless. Thank you for tuning in today.
Thank you.
And, say this every episode, feel free to leave a comment about your thoughts, your experiences, maybe any insight you have on any of the countries we've talked about, or any of the news stories, stuff like that in general. Maybe you have a documentary or video recommendation, or just recommendation in general for people to learn more about overwork culture. And if you're aware of some union efforts, maybe share that as well. We're all for it.
If you guys like this episode and want to stay connected with us, check out our website in the description. It contains links to our streaming platforms such as Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and more. Follow us for more behind-the-scenes content, announcements, and other random things we decide to put on there.
See you next time.
Bye.